Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. It means so much to me that you are listening today. Thank you so much for being here and checking out this podcast, especially if it's your first time. I hope you really enjoy this and you keep coming back. Don't forget to listen to the end of every episode. That's where we have the kids only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. Well, I hope you guys are having an incredible April so far. It's been kind of back and forth in the weather, like raining and cold some days, and some days it's warm. It's just getting me ready for summer. That's all I'm going to say about that. I have to tell you a funny story. The other day I went to the gym and I was trying to put my phone in my pocket so that I could go to one of the treadmills and work out. And I realized I couldn't stick my phone in my pocket. I was having a hard time doing it. And you know what? I realized my pants were inside out. Have you ever had a day like that? It might have been the allergy medicine. It also might have been the fact that I was in a rush and I was going too fast. So I'm ready for summer and ready to chill out a little bit. Well, we have a great episode for you today. You know, I love getting to make new friends, and I am so happy my friend Michelle Reyes, who was actually on episode 64, introduced me to this inspiring children's book author who has a passion for multicultural experiences. Her name is Dorina Lazo Gilmore-Young. She's a speaker, author, poet, teacher, and a mama of three who grew up in a multiracial family. She loves to use words to open hearts to new worlds and cook up new recipes in the kitchen with her three daughters and friends. Dorina is the author of the award-winning kids book, Cora Cook's Pancit. Dorina loves to speak in classrooms and educational settings for kids. She and her family recently started the Global Glory Chasers membership for families who want to learn about culture and food together. I am so excited for you guys to hear this conversation with Dorina Lazo Gilmore-Young. Dorina, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast.
Thank you so much, Christen. I'm delighted to be here today.
I love that we get to talk today, and I'm so excited to talk with you about your book and all the things your family does. So will you just do a quick intro? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Definitely. Well, first and foremost, I am a mama to three girls. So I'm a girl mama. My kids are ages 10, 13, and 15, and I'm married to Sean. I am also a writer, and one of the things that I write that will probably be of interest to your audience is that I write children's books, children's picture books. So I love writing for kids. I love reading my books in the classroom, which I do often. And I also am a podcaster. I host a podcast called Eat, Pray, Run. So we talk about faith and food and culture and family and community on our podcast. A couple other fun things that I do. I'm a running coach. So I coach track and field and cross country at my girls' school, and I coach marathon teams. And I often write about my running as well. So those two kind of intersect together. So those are just a couple things to get to know me.
That's awesome. You sound busy. I love it.
I don't do all those things at the same time, though.
Okay. So. Good to know. Good to know. Well, I am excited to talk to you about all this. But before we do, because this is a podcast for kids, we always like to start out with a joke. So do you have a joke for us you want to share?
Okay. Well, I have to say my husband found this joke for me. He is the one with the silly dad jokes in our family, and I'm usually the one rolling my eyes. But this one was pretty funny. The joke is, what is Harry Potter's favorite way of getting down a hill?
I don't know.
Well, it could be walking, or it could be J.K. Rowling.
I love that. J.K. Rowling. That's perfect. That's so good. That was a great one. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's good. So let's talk about your books. Tell us what books you have written and why you enjoy being a children's book author.
Yeah, well, my most recent book is called Cora Cook's Ponce. I'm going to show the cover of it for maybe those looking later. And this is actually a book that I wrote 11 years ago. I can't believe Cora is that old.
Wow.
But this is a picture book that is about a little Filipino American girl, and she is learning to cook a traditional noodle dish with her mama in the kitchen. And the story is kind of reminiscent of myself growing up in the kitchen with my mom and my grandmas and my aunties, and also through the years how I have trained my own daughters to cook, and we love cooking and creating in the kitchen together. So this book has won several awards. I've had the chance to read it in a lot of different places. And I do have 2 other children's books which came out before that, and then I have a new children's book, actually 2 more that are coming out. The new one that's coming out in 2023 is called Chasing God's Glory. And I'm really excited about that book because right now it's in the illustration phase. So I'm working with my publisher, and they chose an amazing illustrator, and she is making the story come to life. So I keep getting these emails with the beautiful pictures. And of course, I envisioned what it looked like for the little girl Zayla to be chasing God's glory with her mom. She's learning to look for God's glory through her city and through God's creation and through conversation. But to see it come alive through the illustrator's view and the things that she's creating and all the colors is really exciting. So I love that part of the process as well.
That's awesome. That sounds so exciting. How did you become a children's author?
Well, I wanted to be an author since I was a little girl. I loved writing when I was in elementary school, and it was kind of one of those things I had in my heart, like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. But I didn't know exactly how to get there. And as I continued to study in school, in high school, I started to work for the newspaper at our school campus. I was a sports editor. And then in college, I ended up majoring in journalism and became a newspaper reporter. So that was kind of my job and my career coming out of college. And what I loved about that is that as a newspaper reporter, I got to interview people kind of like what you're doing today, Christen. And I got to ask them about their stories and their backgrounds and learn about their culture and their passions. So that gave me just such an excitement for so many stories of people around the world. And then after a few years of working for the newspaper, I actually just took a summer class that was offered here at California State University, Fresno, and it was about writing books for kids. And I had several books that were kind of in the works, but that class really helped me to work on those stories, to hone my craft. And not long after that, then I did get a publisher for my very first book. And so it's a long process, because sometimes we think, oh, well, I've got an idea for a kid's book, but getting that kid's book all the way to a bookstore shelf or Amazon takes a long time.
Yeah, I've heard other authors say it's almost like having another child. Like it takes a long time for it to come out and for all the things to happen. So what's your favorite part of the whole process? We'll be right back after this. You know, raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
Oh, that's such a good question. You know, I actually like so many parts of the process. I love the writing. I love the idea stage, the creating. I also am getting my feet wet for the first time with the illustration conversations. I mentioned that before. not all publishers allow the authors and the illustrators to interact. But my current publisher that I'm working with, which is Penguin Random House, they have invited me into that conversation of what should those pictures look like and giving feedback. So that's been a really exciting part of the process. And honestly, the part I love probably the best is being able to read the book and share it with actual kids. And so I get to do that, whether it's through schools. I do a lot of school visits and author talks, or even just with kids in my own community and church family.
That sounds so fun, just to be able to share it and see people react to it as you're sharing it.
For sure, yes.
Yeah. You also have something that's really interesting, and I definitely want you to talk about this today. It's called Global Glory Chasers. Can you talk about that a little bit? The idea of traveling the world.
Yes. So this is a really fun program that my family and I actually work on together. We put this together, and it came out of kind of the pain and the frustration of being in the pandemic. And so maybe some of the listeners can relate to this. You know, as a family, there were a lot of days and weekends that we were stuck at home, that we had to cancel plans. We love to travel as a family. And so we had saved for several years to do a big trip to Europe. And my oldest daughter had done a lot of the planning on that. And we actually ended up having to cancel that trip. So that was really disappointing. And we had scheduled another trip in its place. We were going to go to Hawaii, and then we had to cancel that because of all the things that were going on. And so long story short, my husband had suggested the night before we were supposed to leave for Hawaii, it was actually over Christmas break last year, he said, well, I know we can't go to Hawaii, but what if we brought Hawaii to the kids? And so he just was kind of thinking in a simple form, like, let's order some Hawaiian barbecue. Maybe we could watch a movie like Moana or something like that. And actually, my family heritage, my dad's family is from Hawaii. So we have some Hawaiian costumes and music, some of that kind of stuff at home. Fun. So I was like, oh, that's such a fun idea. You know, we were all kind of down because we weren't going on our trip. So actually, then my kids, my girls who are very creative, got wind of this idea, and they said, well, what if we went to a different country every night? Because we were on Christmas break, we had nothing to do. And I was like, okay, well, let's think about that. Let's talk about that. I have this whole library of books since I'm a children's book author, and we love to watch movies together. And so that's actually what we did, is we started exploring different countries every night during that vacation time. And through that, we decided, hey, this is something really cool that we could share with other families. And actually had another friend who's a mama who said, Dorina, this is not like something normal that everyone does. Like, you could teach other people how to do this. You could invite them on your adventures. And so that's how Global Glory Chasers was born. It is a membership program, so people can join on a monthly basis. Every month we focus on a different country, and we provide all of the resources. So we give you a curated list of books that you can read, movies you can watch, things that you can learn about the culture. We record kind of a little cooking demo video that my daughter edits. So we show you how to make 3 recipes, and then we share some of our recommendations for learning about that culture.
That is so fun. I love that idea, especially for those families. Like you said, like during the pandemic, we couldn't travel, but there's still some people that are not able to travel right now. So this is such a great idea. And I think it's a great idea, even if you could travel, to kind of learn about a country before you go there. What are some countries that you guys have covered so far?
Well, we're coming up on a year of developing this. So some of the favorites, the Philippines is one of them. And you probably guessed from my children's book, we have Filipino heritage. So that was really fun to explore the Philippines together. And the Philippines is very far away and expensive to travel to. So it was a really great one for us to start with. We've also been to Italy, and my mom's family is from Italy. We had a lot of fun getting into the Italian food and looking at some of the Italian art. There's a lot of museums that offer like virtual tours. So you can go and look at some of the art museums or history museums in different places. Most recently, we just filmed Spain. So for March 2022, we're going to be taking people to Spain. And I loved just exploring some of the Spanish culture. We made paella, which is a famous Spanish dish with rice and seafood and meat in it. So those are a couple of the favorites.
I love that. Do you think learning these different ways of cooking from all these different cultures, does it change the way you cook?
That's a great question. You know what I probably noticed the most, and my girls and I have talked about, is that every culture also has influences from other cultures. So some of the spices that are used, some of the techniques that are used, they also are used in other cultures. And so just for an example, Spanish culture, there is some crossover in Spanish food and Filipino food because of the influence of the Spaniards in the Philippines. And so you can see some of those flavors kind of connect. We also did 2 countries back to back, India and Ethiopia, not realizing how similar those cuisines were as well, and some of the curry mixes of spices. So I think it just has given me a broader sense of just all of the different options that are out there when we're cooking. And for my girls, I think it's really developed in them a curiosity and an interest in trying new foods, even when we're just out with friends, like, oh, let's try this new restaurant. Maybe we'll go to the pho restaurant, which is a Vietnamese soup, or maybe we'll try out this Ethiopian restaurant when we're visiting San Francisco. Like some of those types of choices that I think the exposure through Global Glory Chasers has helped with a lot.
I love that. I think the best way for you to learn, or one of the best ways for you to learn about another culture, is by eating the food. It really is so exciting and it's so interesting. So I think that's such a great idea. We talked a little bit about your book earlier. How do you say it? Cora cooks pancit?
Pancit, yeah.
Yeah, pancit. And that's a Filipino dish?
Yes.
What is it? What is pancit?
Well, it's a traditional Filipino dish. The base of it is noodles, but then you add in a bunch of different vegetables like onions, carrots, celery, water chestnuts, ginger and garlic, and then some people also make it with meat. So in my family, we make it with chicken, and actually the recipe is in the back of my book. So that recipe includes chicken, but sometimes my grandma Cora would use shrimp if she had it on hand, or chunks of beef or pork as well. The thing that is very interesting about pancit, because it is such a traditional dish in Filipino families, everybody makes it a little bit different. So even when we go to one of our favorite Filipino restaurants here in Fresno, where I live, my kids are like, Mom, this doesn't taste like yours. And I'm like, well, that's because somebody else made it. And everybody has a little bit different techniques and quantities of ingredients that they add.
That's awesome. Why was that so important for you to include this type of cultural idea in your book?
Well, for me, it was important because I think recipes tell a story. And I grew up in the kitchen with my grandmas and my aunties learning all these recipes. But what I realized is that a lot of my cousins and the others who were part of my generation or younger, they didn't really know how to make these traditional foods. And a lot of times, like even my grandma, my Filipino grandma and my Italian grandma on both sides, it was like they were kind of in charge and they were doing all the steps. They would just give you what we would call the kid job, like something small to do, but you didn't really know how it all came together. And I had the privilege, before both of my grandmas went to heaven, being able to just kind of sit down with them and jot down some of the recipe and the steps. And so this story, even though it's fictional, it's preserving the story of the recipe and how the recipe comes together. And Cora and her mom even talk a little bit about their family history and the history of Filipino Americans here in Central California where I live. So it's an opportunity to teach about culture and to teach about our legacy.
Why do you think it's important to teach about culture?
You know what? That's such a great question. I think that really it comes back to the way that God designed us. God designed each of us uniquely. He designed us in his image. We use this phrase imago Dei, which is a Latin phrase meaning in the image of God. And so God created me to look different from you, Christen, and to have some different heritage and traditions and backgrounds. And that's actually not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing to be celebrated. And so the more that we learn about our own culture and then about the cultures of others, the more we get to know God and we get to experience his glory. And so for me as a Christian, that is why it's so important to learn about other cultures.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we learn a lot about who God is and just his creativity and the things that he's put in someone else that I can benefit from just by knowing them and by experiencing their culture and their differences. So that's so good. You also have, let's talk a little bit about your new book that's coming out called Chasing God's Glory. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, I'm so excited about this book. So I was talking a little bit before about the illustration process. I love this idea that God created us to be glory chasers. And what I mean by that is that he invites us to look for his glory and to experience it everywhere we go. And so for years, I've been writing about this concept and talking about it when I speak for different groups. And the idea then is, well, how can we see God and how can we experience him with our five senses every day? And so this is a book specifically for kids. It's about a little girl, Zayla, which is named after my youngest daughter. And she's asking her mom, what's God's glory? What's it all about? And then her mom says, okay, well, let's go on a bike ride and I'm going to show you. And so basically then they go on this bike ride through their town. They see a beautiful sunset. They see a field of daffodils. They go down to the farmer's market and see all the delicious and colorful foods. They drive by a church where some girls are practicing a praise dance that's for a church service. So they experience God's glory there. They even experience his glory as they're reminiscing a little bit about the girl Zayla's dad who went to heaven. And that actually is part of my family story. My first husband went to heaven 7 years ago. He died of cancer. And I am remarried. I think I mentioned at the top, I'm married to a man named Sean. But that even is part of the experience of God's glory, that sometimes we experience sad things, but God meets us there. Mm-hmm. And in that place, he reminds us that he is present with us. So these are just some of the ways that the little girl experiences God's glory through the book. And then, of course, the illustrations make it come alive.
Yeah. What are some things that you've learned about chasing God's glory through putting this book together?
Oh, I love that question. This is actually the first time I'm really talking about this book in an interview. I'm so excited for it to come out. You know, for me, I think just some of the little details behind the scenes are a reminder of God's glory and how I experience it. So I love the selection process of how my publisher found a woman who is Filipino and she's the illustrator. And so hearing a little bit of her heritage and the ways that God connects us through our heritage. I also love how this book connects me with other writers. And I know you've had my friend Dorina Williamson on your podcast before. I know, so funny that we have the same first name. I've never met another Dorina in my life, but Dorina is actually one of my friends.
That's awesome.
And she has the same publisher and editor, along with a couple of other friends, Dr. Lucretia Berry and Sochiel Dixon, Tina Cho, some other women who are writing for the same publisher. And so we get to experience the family of God as writers. And I think even that is an expression of God's glory.
I love that. And I love that you get to include parts of your own story in this book and have that as a way for people to remember and reflect on that. So that's really cool. Well, this has been so much fun. I have loved talking with you today and learning about all your books and all the food. I'm hungry now after talking with you about all the food. I'm so excited to check this out for sure. How can our listeners find more about your books?
Well, probably the best way to get more information about me and my books and my speaking is through my website. It's dorinagilmore.com. So real easy to find. And then also, I love to hang out on Instagram. I do lots of interviews and Bible teaching and share about my books on Instagram. So I'd love it if you would follow me on Instagram. That's also a great way that you can find out about some of the speaking. I love, like I said before, I love talking to kids groups. So I do classroom visits in person and virtually, and I love to read my books. So maybe I'll get to meet some of your listeners someday through that.
Oh, that's so fun. I love that for sure. Well, this has been so great. Before I let you go, though, I always like to ask my guests to share a memory from when you were a kid. And you shared some great ones already. Do you have another one you want to share with us?
Well, this is kind of a funny one because I ended up becoming a writer, and I always share this when I'm in the classroom with kids. But when I was in first grade is when I wrote my first story that I actually remember. And my teacher, Mrs. Kaczynski, she had invited us to create a story. And so I wrote this story about two unicorns who fell in love. And this was before unicorns were such a thing as they are now. But I named that unicorn after the boy that I liked in first grade. Wow. It was a very brave move. But my teacher loved this book so much. And she wrote so many encouraging words. She used little red pen and said things like, how romantic, and I love your details, and excellent job. And, I still remember those encouraging words that she gave me. And so I like to say that Mrs. Kaczynski planted a seed in my heart that one day maybe I could become a writer. And it's because she encouraged me.
Yeah, I love hearing stories about great teachers because they have such a great influence on so many kids, and they don't even know sometimes the impact they made on someone's life. So that's incredible. And I think you need to focus now on writing a unicorn book. I think that needs to be your next book.
Oh my goodness. I had no idea unicorns would become such a rage. Especially my youngest daughter, who's 10, she was in love with unicorns a couple of years ago. So I had to laugh that was my first story I wrote.
Well, it'll be all the rage. It'll go viral and all that stuff. So that's fun. Well, Dorina, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was such a pleasure talking with you and learning about your story. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me. And thanks to all your listeners, too, for just sharing this time with us.
Wasn't that so fun? I loved learning about her books and about her Global Glory Chasers program. She said recipes tell a story. Isn't it so interesting? Learning about culture, heritage, and your own family background is really important, and food and experiences like this are a great way to celebrate and tell stories. I love when she said that God designed each of us uniquely in His own image. The more that we learn about our own culture and the cultures of others, the more we get to know God. That's so true. She also shared about her new book, Chasing God's Glory, and it was inspired by this idea that God invites us to look for His glory and experience it everywhere we go. Hey, if you have missed going on trips or you're interested in looking into other cultures or different countries that you might want to visit, Dorina and her family have made a virtual experience out of this where you get to try the food and learn from different books that they recommend and different experiences. It's really interesting. I hope that you will check this out. It's called Global Glory Chasers, and it's a membership program you can join and get all the good information about lots of countries. I also encourage you to check out her books and be on the lookout for her new book coming out next year. You can find more at DorinaGilmore.com or follow her on social media. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So here is my friend Karis Owens.
My name is Karis Owens, and I am 8 years old. My favorite Bible verse is Psalms 1:1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers.
Thank you, Karis, for sharing that verse with us. You said that so well, and I love Psalms. That's my favorite book of the Bible. Well, if you would like to be on the kids only segment, just like Karis was, I would love to hear your favorite verse, or maybe you have a joke or a quote that you like from a book or movie. You can find information about how to send that to me through my social media. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a few ways you can do that. First, be sure to subscribe and follow this podcast so that new episodes will automatically load each week into whatever podcast app you're using. And I would would so appreciate if you would leave a rating and a review. I love reading those, and it helps other people find out about the show. You can also share this episode with friends and family and tell them why you and your family like to listen. Or you can go by my website, collidekidspodcast.com, and click the link that says Buy Me a Coffee. It actually doesn't buy me a coffee. It just is a little bit of financial support that equals the amount of a cup of coffee. And anytime you think about it, I always appreciate your prayer support as well. Well, I hope you guys have an amazing week and that you look for God's glory and experience it everywhere you go. In case no one has told you today, I'd love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.